Hi guys, so welcome to another Pieandbelle Art Class. Today we're going to look at doing a portrait of a lady looking down with gravity, so we're going to have drips in it, and we're working fairly loose on this one with just a little hint of details around her eyes and mouth. It's a lot of kind of chucking colours in as we're going along and having a bit of fun with it. So once you've drawn your little face out and just got a general idea of where things are, you want to have as minimal drawing as possible underneath. You can see I haven't got a lot of the hair in there or anything. I've just got an idea of where that hair comes down and where the neck comes into, and a little bit of where her lips come into. And I've done this all really lightly with a HB pencil. Then what I'm going to do is make up all my colours. So I'm going to use all my two sets of primary colours, which is my cool and warm set of reds, yellows and blues. And I've got a cool brown there to help me make my darker shades easier and quicker, just because it helps you out, makes it go faster. So I'm going to make up my base skin tone. I'm going to touch a little bit of blue and red into that yellow ochre, and I'm going to water it down so that it's a nice thin consistency. And I had to add a little red to that just because she has got quite a warm skin tone, this girl. So I chose one with the eyes down just purely for the fact that I didn't have to actually worry about getting any masking fluid on there to kind of mask out where her eyes are, or taking out where her eyes were. It can just cover her whole entire face with this colour. And I'm going to start making up some little colours to pop in. So I'm going to put some purples where I see shadows, and I'm going to wash them out with a damp brush and push it around. Now at the moment I'm adding quite a lot of water to her face. I've made it quite a lot, kind of quite damp and wet, and the reason for this is that I want it to drip in a minute, so I'm just putting it kind of basically where I see things, but then this whole section you're going to have to go over and do it again anyway, because we're going to let this all drip out in a minute, but we want a lot of colour in there. So now I'm going to stand it up and let it drip. Now what I'm doing there, where you can see where I'm touching the brush, is I'm just touching the brush at the bottom to create drips. Sometimes you need to kind of help them out a little bit, and I'm also kind of running it over if it's going into the wrong place. But when you touch it where you want them to go and push them down, and you might have to add some water to make them actually run off the page, this will mean that you don't have such kind of crazy drips going wherever you don't want them to be. You can control them a little bit. So I wanted 3 coming off the bottom there, so I helped them out by adding a little bit of water. And now I'm pushing that colour around. Now you can see that the colour did stay in where I touched it originally. So the yellow is still where the yellow was, and the purple is still where the purple was, but it's obviously a lot lighter now because they've all run off the bottom. So I'm going to add some warmth into her face with this kind of orangey colour. And I'm taking out, you can see there I'm drying off the brush and taking it out if I don't want it in that place. And her face is still all very, very wet at this point. So I can play around with it and move it around. And I want to make this whole first layer really, really soft. So nothing is done harsh. If it is harsh, if that part is dried already, I'm going to brush it out with a little bit of a damp brush, a little damp brush on it, so that it kind of pushes it out. And now I'm going to come in with some darker shadows. Now you can see you can touch it in quite dark and then kind of play around with it whilst it's still damp. You can kind of move that colour around to where you want it and take it out a little bit if it's too heavy. But really I just want to give myself this whole first layer. It's a very loose style picture that we're working on, so this whole first layer is all really soft and merged into each other. Also, I tend to think that when I'm doing shadows, especially on a picture like this where there's a lot of kind of drips and craziness going on, shadows I tend to pop out a little bit more to the blue side or to purple, just because I think that's a much nicer colour to use than brown. So I'm kind of mixing it up and trying to use a little bit of brown, a little bit of blue, so that it gives it a little bit of interest, because this isn't a photorealistic piece that we're doing. It is actually just a bit of a fun kind of creative piece, so you can kind of swap out dark browns and dark colours for blues and purples, and you can kind of play around with it. You can see if I put something where I don't want it, I always have some kitchen roll to hand, and I just tap that out. So once I'm happy with this first layer, I am actually going to stop and I'm going to let that dry. So I'm just getting some idea. Now that it's drying a little bit more, I can actually place the colour a little bit more where I want it to be. And I'm taking out that jawline and moving that all out. So once you have it start drying, you can actually kind of put it a little bit more in a particular place, because water doesn't just go everywhere. You can actually push it around into the positions you want it to be. Now I'm not going to go in as heavy with her shadows on her face as they are. I'm actually going to do them a little bit more subtle, but that's because I want this piece overall to be quite a kind of pastel pretty piece. So I'm going to make her hair dark, but I'm not going to bring in such a lot of dark kind of bits of her shadows on her eyes, because she's got quite heavy shadows on her eyes. I'm still going to put them in the right place, the shadows. I'm just not going to put them quite as heavy. Now with her hair, I'm making up a base colour, and I'm going to put in 2 to 3 other colours. You can see there's blonde bits, so I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. I'm also going to add a little bit of yellow ochre. And really, you want to do this all fairly quickly, this whole section, and then you can always come and tidy it up later. But it looks so much nicer if you actually get some idea of the brush strokes in and you work fairly quick, because the hair is just hair. Even if you get it in a slightly different place, it's not like the face where you actually are trying to get features in the correct area. With the hair, it can just kind of be all over the place really, because it is free and wild. So I am actually just kind of trying to work quite quickly so that you get that lovely kind of effect of all the brush marks in it. So I've come in with, that's the blue and the black, blue and the brown mixed together to make a kind of blacky brown. And I think I bring in an actual blue, I make kind of blacky colour, and then I actually bring in like blue as well into her hair. And you can see how quickly you can get that hair, and it just looks really cool really quickly. So you can see the colours separating out there, and you're getting a little bit of blue and a little bit of brown and a little bit of black all over the place, and those little yellow pops are just really, really fine now. I'm just doing some little bits, then I'm going to splatter, and then literally I'm just going to leave that to dry. So now she's dry, I'm going to start working on her features. So I've still got the same palette, I've just got some new clean water, and I'm going to start putting in her features. Now I'm not going to follow her exactly, because I'm just doing this as a bit of a fun piece. Obviously if I was going to do it for a person, you'd have to be a little bit more precise. You might want to redraw her features on. Now that you've done this kind of base level, you might want to redraw her features on a little bit more precisely, so that it looks exactly the same as them, and spend a bit of time on your drawing, or do the grid method to actually get the drawing on there. But I'm just kind of doing her as a bit of a fun piece. So with the eyebrows, I'm doing a light brown wash, and then I'm touching in some of that dark and letting it kind of wash in itself. And I will come back in with a little bit of dark black over the top and put some little kind of dashes of eyebrows over the top of that later. And now I am actually going to make up with that peachy colour I had before. I'm going to add a little bit of brown to that and make a kind of slightly deeper peachy colour, and I'm going to put some of those kind of folds of her eyes and around her nose, all with that same colour. Because she's got quite a lot of colour in the background now, she's got like purples and blues and yellows in that background, you can actually just work with one colour over the top to give yourself some dimension and to give yourself some shape on her, because she's already got such a lot of heavy colour going on everywhere else that you don't have to swap it up quite as much with this kind of work. And I'm just going to start defining her cheekbones and where her eyes are. I'm also going to put in the shadows of her eyelashes there, which are kind of underneath in a peachy colour. And then I'll put her eyelashes over the top in a deeper colour. Now I think the main thing is with any watercolour is looking at it and knowing that this is the mid stage, so it's not going to look exactly how you want it at every stage. It's going to have areas of time where it doesn't look very good, and that's fine. You know, you're just playing around and getting used to how you're doing it. Now at this point I'm just putting in that base colour of her entire lips. So I'm just trying to get her lip shape at that point, really not worrying about the colours too much, because I can add some more different colours later on. And I'm going to get an idea of her shirt just with a bit of blue, and I'm going to add a bit of grey where the shadow would come across near her neck. And again, I'm going to use gravity and touch where I want my little drips to go. So I'm adding water, but I'm touching a little drip shape down at the bottom and allowing that to fall. And you'll see now I come in with a little bit of that greyish colour just to give her a little bit of shadow up by her neck. And a hint of her t-shirt underneath her hair there. And now I'm going to leave that to dry. Just filling out her brows a bit more. And then I'm going to let that area dry and work on our last piece, which is going to be her features. So obviously you can play around with putting little bits in, but whilst she's got those drips and those splats on there, obviously I was just being a bit impatient, but it's probably best to wait for them to dry unless you do lean in it and smudge it out. I'm just kind of shaping out her ears with the hair, because I did that hair so quickly. So that's all dried now, and now I'm actually going to come in and give her some actual proper features. I'm going to put some different colours in her lips, and I'm going to make her have eyelashes and an eyelid a bit more clear than what she's got at the moment. So now is the time when you really do want to be leaning against your work, so it has to be dry, and also not having it taped down is really, really good, because obviously you need to move around to where your hand is at its most comfortable. So with her eyelashes, I find doing the eyelashes going up is the most easiest way for me to do it. So that's what I'm doing there. But I'm finishing them off, because the thing is, it's easier to do the strokes that way, but you might find that you have to do a couple when you turn it the right way up, just because that bit isn't as full or filled out or whatever. So whatever's the easiest way of you doing it, twist it around. And now you can start seeing her kind of take effect. Now getting the actual shape of the join of her lips is really important on this, because I'm not doing heavy detail on this, I'm not making it photorealistic. So things like getting that kind of weird little shape of her lips is really important, because we're not putting a heavy amount of detail in this. And that will be the thing that makes it kind of look interesting and realistic, even though you're not going crazy with it. And now I've just used that same kind of colour that was the peach mixed with the brown, and I'm just putting where it's a bit shadowy on her lips. So she's got a lighter area in the middle of her lips, and then a shadowy area around the top and bottom where her lips join and where her lip goes down to the bottom. So you can see how that actually does, even with just two tones. So she's got the base tone of her lips and then that kind of darker tone on, and it does make a big difference. And I'm just going to start bringing in her eyelid shape here as well. So I think doing the kind of little bit more detail around her face when you've done the hair so loose, and then you've got the drips going down on the clothes and the clothes are barely there, it's a really interesting kind of way of doing a portrait. It's quite a pretty way of doing a portrait. And now I'm going to start working on those shadows. Now the shadows are what will make this look a lot more 3D and give her a lot more kind of features that you can see. So like obviously defining her nose and her chin, and underneath her chin where the shadow is to her neck. So these are important. You don't have to take them as heavy as in the photo, like I said, but they are important to at least get in to a point. Otherwise she'll just look like kind of a floating face, and she won't have the definition between her neck and her head, and she won't have the definition around her nose. So it is important to get those shadows in, because obviously they actually help make the features as well sometimes. So also getting that kind of shape of her face in, and the fact that the light is coming from the right, so everything on the left needs to have a little bit of shadow going on. And remember, soften it all out as you're going. Dry off your brush, clean off your brush, dry off your brush, and then push that colour into the background colour so that it's seamless. So you can see how that really defines her nose there, putting that little bit of shadow in. And that's what I'm talking about. Half of it is obviously doing the details, but half of it is actually kind of putting in the shadows to create the features as well. And you can take this to as high as you want to it. You know, like I said, I'm not going to take it quite as deep and dark as on the photo. And I do think I'd change that shadow on her chin, because I feel like that shadow is very straight there, but actually it should be slightly more down if it's to be the correct place for the rest of her face. The light shouldn't be coming that straight to the right hand side of her face, so I do change that angle of that. And you can just wash it out. So if you find something like that happens, like the shadow's in slightly the wrong place, you can actually change it up a little bit and just wash out the join. So if you see here, I do change the shape of it now and I make it go a little bit more slanty. And you can wash out that join in the middle and push it all together. Even if it's dry, you can wash out joins. You just have to kind of scrub it a little bit. That's why it's good to have a high quality paper, because then you can kind of push out things like that. And now I'm just darkening up her eyelids a tad, just because I felt like they were a little bit too bright. Even though I'm not doing them as heavy as in the picture, I still need to have some sort of shadow going on the left hand side of them. And I feel like that's it. So it's a really interesting one this week, kind of half loose, half detailed, just working with interest and kind of lots of colours going on. So when you're working loose, definitely have a lot of colour. And then when you do the detail, you can actually kind of reduce your colour palette down. I hope you liked it, guys. Thanks.